everyone. You are watching Direct Line from coast to coast to border. It is Direct Line. Our guest this evening is Diana Waterman, former president of MFRW, former chairman, 2 terms, Maryland GOP, and countless number of campaigns, which I can't even go through right now, that she's worked on in the past. Welcome to the show, Diana. Take it away, Mark and Jackie.
Thank you, Dwight. And Diana, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this evening?
I am doing very well, Jackie, and thank you all for having me. Thank you, Dwight, Mark, Jackie.
You know, I thought we could put underneath you, we say former president of MFRW, but we really, former state chairman. I really think it's Diana who needs no introduction should be the right description. Yeah. We're really glad to have
Mark.
you.
Diana.
That is awfully nice of you to say. But, pretty soon I would need all those introductions because all the new people around wouldn't know who I was. They weren't around for all that other stuff.
Yes.
Well, it's been a really busy week in Maryland politics, so we definitely want to talk to you and break it down. I think the biggest piece of news coming out is that Senator Cardin will not be seeking re-election for U.S. Senate. So now the time comes to see who on both sides is going to jump into that race. So what was your take on that, just from when it came out?
My take was, like everybody else, not really that surprised. Pretty much it was a matter of when was he going to announce it, that he was not going to run again, not that he was or wasn't. Again, everybody's, I'm sure you read and hear the same things I read and hear, and maybe some extra stuff too, but that Congressman Trone is considered a serious candidate, and quite frankly, once he and his money get in, or when he and his money get in, it completely changes the dynamics. Just from the little bit of scrambling or posturing that we've already heard, it sounds like it's going to be a potentially crowded primary field on the D side. And as far as our side, again, no big news today. Governor Hogan, saying, I don't want that job, which is what me and I'm sure many, many others have been saying for ages now. He is not one of 100. He is one of one kind of person. So that also was not a big surprise. Now, who from our side will get in, that's more interesting. And even so, and I can talk a little differently now that former's in front of my titles as opposed to current, because when you're current, you have to talk differently than when you're not. But for us to win a statewide election, as we have seen time and time again, with the exception pretty much in recent history of Bob Ehrlich and Larry Hogan, it takes a virtual act of God, a miracle from God, the parting of the Red Seas or something likewise for Republican candidate to win statewide. And again, it boils down to my adage has always been the only time we can win statewide is when they hate their candidate more than they hate ours.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really seeing that happening with Trone or I forget his name, but the county councilman who's already, him or Raskin or the county exec, PG County.
Angela also Brooks, I've heard, is not exactly well liked. Although I guess my other question being, you mentioned, right, it takes an act of God with the exception of 2 people, one of whom has said that he doesn't want the job. Do you see Governor Bob Ehrlich putting his name in the hat?
Oh gosh, no. I think Governor Bob Ehrlich is very happy with his position as former governor, especially at this point in his life where his kids are and all this stuff. He doesn't need that headache. And a statewide race is a huge physical undertaking. Mm-hmm. No one realizes quite how big our state is until you start driving it from Somerset County to Garrett County to the Pennsylvania border. It's a huge state.
Yeah. Well, I know Nicole Bennett is out there listening somewhere, and I know she's done that drive in one day before. So, no, and it is interesting. I read a really interesting National Review article earlier talking exactly about Hogan's decision not to run and mentioned exactly what you said, that he doesn't want to be one of 100. But it also talks about if to affect the kind of change he's talking about, that moving on from this Trump era of Republican politics, it takes then somebody like Larry Hogan running for that seat and being in the weeds with these people to affect that change from the inside. Do you think he's considered that, or it's always just well, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be more of a presidential type thing.
I mean, I've never saw him wanting to be one of 100. And even if you're down in the weeds, it takes more than one of 100 to change things. I mean, I think a lot of senators, Republican senators, have gone in with that notion that they're going to change things, or congressmen for that matter, that they're going to change things. And they get in there and realize just how little they can do by themselves. They need a coalition, a caucus, a group of them, a sufficiently large group of them to really affect change. Not to say we should throw in the towel and give up, because we can't do that either. And we need to have a good, strong candidate running, but who that's going to be, I don't know. You know, if we look back at when Kathy Szeliga ran for the Senate seat, she was probably one of the best positioned candidates we had, and it still, you know, just was chipping away at the numbers.
It was interesting, wasn't it, Diana, that, you know, sometimes even politicians who are going to eventually decide not to run enjoy the, how shall I say, the romance associated with thinking about running. And certainly Larry Hogan would have attracted considerable national attention with teasing out the prospect. But that said, he was pretty fast out of the gate saying no. He was almost as fast as Will Jawando was in getting into the race.
Yes.
Which is, that actually deserves a whole nother set of conversation. But anyway, he by closing the door so quickly, I guess that did suggest that a rather definitive no.
Most definitely. And most likely he's got definitely some other plans in mind that he could come out that quickly. Then again, maybe he just, you know, I mean, we all know that he does like to be interviewed and be in the limelight, but I guess he figured there was no point in coaxing as much out of this announcement as possible.
So you mentioned, and I think we all knew, that one of the front runners on the Dem side going into that race is going to be David Trone, thus leaving the Congressional District 6 seat as an open seat as well. What's your take on that seat, which I think after redistricting is one of our most likely pickups?
I think once we remove David Trone from that equation, it becomes a far more winnable race than even it was last time when Neil was running for it. Whether Neil's going to go for another time, I don't know, or you know, some of the other congressional candidates that are on our side might go for that district. It'll be interesting to see how it is, and it'll even be more interesting to see who comes along on the Democrat side to step up and try and fill that, and what that does to the race from our perspective. If they have a messy primary or a weak candidate shows up on their side, it greatly increases. When you don't have a bottomless pit of money, so that no matter how much the Republican candidate raises and spends, you can write another check and put a few more commercials, a few more pieces of mail out, it becomes a very different race.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say that the Democratic primary politics in Montgomery County are light years different than where the rest of District 6 is. That yes. You could, the prospect is that you could have a really hard left progressive Will Jawando-esque candidate win that primary, and obviously be completely out of step with the rest of it. Whereas at least David Trone could, you know, talk about having been a businessman and didn't quite have quite the same baggage that others did. You know, it's interesting that Roscoe Bartlett. Remember Roscoe Bartlett?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we age ourselves by that. Jackie wasn't even born when Roscoe Bartlett first ran for Congress, and he came incredible. Actually, he ran in Republican primary. I think he came in 5th or something like that. And in 92, there was a Democratic primary where the incumbent, who was kind of a moderate Democrat, remember moderate Democrats, many of them in Maryland, lost the primary, and that set up the situation where Roscoe was able to win because Western Maryland, again, that was a district that went Montgomery County to Western Maryland. That really set up the scenario in which Roscoe won, because they may have liked Bev Byron, who was a moderate centrist Democrat, but I can't even remember. I wasn't here then, but the Democrat who won that primary and knocked her off was just too far to the left. And it was a Republican seat, obviously, for the next 20 years.
Well, and I was thinking about this, about who from the Dem side could potentially get into that race. And at least that I can think of, they don't have a very large bench. Potentially Jan Gardner, former Frederick County executive. Maybe David Blair moves over to District 6. I'm pretty sure he lives in 8 now and jumps in because he's another one who's got a lot of money to his name. Maybe Mark Elrich decides to move over and run for it. Or do we see a scenario where Jamie Raskin from District 8 also jumps into the Senate race, and that opens up another open seat? Or John Sarbanes in District 3? You know, how many different people are we going to see jump ship to run for that Senate seat?
And we should get Dutch to run too, right?
Right. Might as well get them all, right? And then we see a similar situation what we're seeing in Dianne Feinstein's seat in California.
My guess,
it won't
go.
Can we? How many Democrats can we get in that primary?
Oh, we could get them all in, since it's the whole big state. But interesting, when you were talking about Gardner possibly running for the CD6 seat. What about Mike Huff?
Right.
I think Mike Huff would
that's
be.
His district. Although, you know, as we all know, you don't actually have to live in the district to run when you're running for Congress.
Right.
So they don't even have to move anywhere. They just have to say they want to do it.
Right. Although he's probably got his hands full, I'm sure, with Alex Mooney's primary Senate campaign in West Virginia.
You know, that's actually, I was just thinking of that. There was an interesting development, sort of the collateral thing is Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, has indicated that he's running for the Senate. So, well, you know Alex better than I, but that may not dissuade Alex from running from the primary. But on the other hand, it might just cause him to run for re-election. So that could change the dynamic in West Virginia, and they may look to Mike Huff and say, why not run?
I have trouble seeing Alex backing out of this unless it was so blatantly obvious. That's a problem. But eons ago, back when I was his first vice chair, I can remember one of the first fundraisers we were at. I don't even know how we got on the topic, but his life goal has always been to be a U.S. senator. So, I mean, that he took the path that he has taken to get there. And the fact that he's actually doing it is pretty phenomenal, because most people have a dream and don't necessarily, you know, get over the hurdles or the roadblocks in the way to make it come true. When he just announced that he was moving to West Virginia to run for Congress, I thought he was crazy. So, and that what turned out very well for him. Turned out very well for me too, but it turned out very well for him.
Maybe that means it's not so crazy that we'll pick up a couple of seats in Maryland next cycle, huh?
It's a good thing to think. It's a very good thing to think. And you're one of those people who have an active title now, so you have to say that.
I'm thinking of so many names that on our side for who could potentially run for any of these seats in 6, in 8, if Raskin jumps ship, in 2 and 3, and I'm just like you said, you have former in front of your name now, and now I don't. So,
although I mean, to put a positive spin, you know, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. It's a great opportunity for somebody in the Maryland legislature, because it's an open seat. You don't come up for another 3 years. You don't come up until 2026. With statewide or higher office aspirations to take a shot at the Senate and to take those long car rides from one end of the state to the other, and to become more familiar with the state and really kind of raise your profile to a point that you become better known.
Oh yeah, it's definitely, you see more of our legislators running when there's no risk on their seat.
Right.
But all of these campaigns are very, very expensive.
I'm astonished that one of our regular viewers, and I mean regular viewers who always shares a message, has not weighed in yet. So he must, in fact, be out campaigning already for the Senate as he is running.
He had to have new literature made.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I'm going, who's he talking about? Oh, okay. I know now.
I'm sorry, Rob. No reason to be coy. Is Robin Ficker is a regular viewer and regular commenter. He frequently has a couple of questions for each of our. So I will channel Robin Ficker and ask, what about Robin?
Well,
come on, you were chairman. You were chairman for a couple of years. You should be able to handle a question like that.
I can flip into chairman mode and do that, definitely. Robin is an experienced campaigner, not camper, but campaigner who has traveled all over our state. I mean, he's often in down the ocean and talking to the folks there, although it's a little cold for that now, so he's probably not there yet. But I mean, he understands what is required of campaigning. I just think that it's as putting on the former part, he is a perennial candidate, and when you've run many, many, many times, people tend to I shouldn't say not notice that you're there, but kind of take for granted your candidacy, and it's not as exciting or splashy as somebody who maybe hasn't run multiple times before or hasn't run for that particular race. So, yeah. I mean, if talking about candidates who run again, in the article that I was reading today about about possible candidates, is they brought up Michael Steele's name again, who is also a former chairman of the MDGOP, among other things. And he has run for Senate before. I remember working hard on that campaign and being crushed when we didn't win. But I got better at losing. But so I don't really see Michael stepping back into the fray again with this either. I think that there are plenty of potential new people, and I shouldn't say new, but people that have not run for offices like this before that might be there. I mean, we brought up Michael Huff, and we brought up our legislators. We've got a lot of really good top-notch senators and delegates that might stick their toes into the water this go around, especially if more of these seats open up because they decide to run for Congress. But I really see a lot of those our other congressmen not wanting to get into this because they got a safe bet. And if there's a whole lot of them going, it's very prestigious to be the senator, but it's really nice holding on to your office and your title and not finding a new gig after if you don't succeed.
I wonder if there's a bit of a dynamic, though, if a lot of people get into the race, that it sort of feeds on itself of people look around and say, well, if those 7 people can, all I need is my 15% and I can get it, that you end up attracting more people into the pool than you might otherwise have done. So we'll see what happens with that.
So why don't we shift gears a little bit from the candidate side of things to our auxiliary and grassroots side of things and talk about what's going on with the Women's Federation? Because
thank you, Jackie. I was going to suggest that myself, looking at the time as it ticks by. The Maryland Federation of Republican Women just held our spring board meeting this past weekend in my home county, in Queen Anne's County, and we were graced by the presence of one man only amidst all the lovely ladies, and that would be Mark. He traveled from Montgomery County to the Eastern Shore and joined with us and bravely sat as the lone man in the room full of women. So that was exciting and good. And the next, I do want to scroll back down a little bit. Oh, right there, good. I wanted to talk about our next event that's going to be our Sunday brunch on Sunday, May 21st at the Severn Inn in Annapolis, Maryland. This is not our luncheon, our annual luncheon. This is actually the evolution, or at least maybe a slight change to the afternoon tea that we started, which was actually Jackie's idea. So I can plug both our hosts tonight. A few years ago, we started with an afternoon tea, which was absolutely wonderful and delightful. And where was it? It was in Montgomery County at
it was at oh God,
Normandy Farms.
Normandy Farms, which rip to Normandy Farms. We'll miss them forever.
Yes. Which is probably why we're not having a tea there this year. Yep. But anyway, we have switched to a Sunday brunch, and we're really excited to welcome as our special guest speaker that day, our second vice president with the National Federation of Republican Women, Michelle Buckwalter Sherman, who is a dynamic, just fun-loving, great woman who will be traveling to our state to join us. It's $75 for members of the MFRW and $100 for non-members. So we'd love to have guests come. You don't have to be a member. And the brunch and networking will be from noon to 2 p.m. with program and speaker following. So it's plenty of time for most people to get to church on Sunday morning if that's what they want to do. I'm Catholic, so I can go on Saturday night, but and not have to rush on Sunday morning. But to allow people to go to church first and then come and join us. So we would love to see a full room of folks there. Mark, hopefully you will join us for that event, and Jackie as well.
Full disclosure, I've been going to Women's Federation events since before I was a teenager. And part of the reason was I was interested in getting in politics when I was, 12 years old, pre-TAR. And my mother thought I was too young to, go to some of the places where they were having meetings. So she signed up for what was called the Frontier Club of Republican Women in Erie County. And she got involved and became president and moved up the ladder. And after about 3 years, I think in 16, anyway, later on, she brought me down to Washington to the National Convention, which was at the Park Sheridan. So I have a long history. I've been recruiting for the Women's Federation Club since before I was old enough to be a young Republican.
Picturing little tween Mark running around at the women's.
Right.
And then as he got a little older, he's like, there's all women. And now that he's even older, it's even older women. So,
yes, right.
That better around. But they're still younger. We are actually working very hard to lower our average age by bringing in some younger women. And men can be associate members, as I am sure Mark is an associate member of at least one of the Montgomery clubs. And, he could also be an associate member of the virtual club.
Well, that actually was one of the things I was tarred was, should I be an associate member of Chevy Chase? And as it happened, I sat next to their president, Katja Bullock, who, if she had seen Chevy Chase on my name tag, would immediately have said, when do you going to pay your dues? Or, of course, obviously the virtual club, which I personally think is a great idea and a great innovation on the part of the Federation to be able.
Well, it just so happens you can be an associate member of as many clubs as
I know.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to fight Katja for your dues.
No. He can write multiple checks or multiple charges out there, and usually our associate membership dues are fairly nominal, fairly low, and so that to make it more affordable for the men to belong to multiple clubs. But the virtual club is also a good one if you have multiple ones around you and you don't want to be a member pay to be members of all of them, because the virtual is
or if you don't want to leave your house.
That too. But that's pretty much what's happening here. We're doing that. We are planning our annual luncheon for sometime in the fall, as well as our fall convention will be sometime in the fall. Oh, and one last exciting thing, and then there's something that I also want to plug, is our national convention. The National Federation of Republican Women's Convention is at the end of September in Oklahoma City. And a large group of us most likely will be traveling west to Oklahoma City for our national convention.
Awesome.
But switching gears a little bit to this lovely band ticker thing that's been running across the whole time we've been talking. Very good friend of mine, Luann Rudell, and who is president of the Garrett County Republican Women, but also chairman of the Garrett County Republican Central Committee, is very excited about their Lincoln Reagan Day dinner, which is going to be Monday, June 1st Monday, June 5th. I can't talk. And they are going to have Vivek Ramaswamy. Is that right?
Nailed it. Perfect.
Good. As their speaker. Now, if you don't know who that is, because many people go, who? He is a candidate for president. And that field that's going to get very probably crowded on our side as well. He's the Robin Ficker as far as jumping in early.
But he has had some very thoughtful comments about the Federal Reserve. I think the Wall Street Journal did some very positive comments and said, well, if he isn't president, he should be Secretary of Treasury. So it'll be great. It'll be great. It'll be great to hear from him. It's always a great event out at Garrett County. I mean, I saw that the announcements made today. I'm assuming it's at WISP because that's usually
it will be at WISP.
It will be at WISP because that's usually where the Garrett County dinner is. You know, if you're not prepared to do the full go there and come back, you can get great accommodations at WISP, which may be
super affordable accommodations. And it's not your standard chicken dinner. Luann typically does like Thanksgiving dinner, turkey, stuffing, apple pie. Dwight, Mark's favorite, having dessert. So yeah, it's going to be incredible.
Nobody beats dessert in Washington County. At the country club in Washington County, the chocolate cake, that is without doubt the best Lincoln Day dinner dessert that I've ever had.
We should have a whole show just reviewing the dinner parts of the Lincoln Day dinners.
You know, I remember
we actually did that on Dr. Politics years ago.
That sounds like a Dr. Politics topic because I'm old. I'm feeling old, but my first Lincoln dinner, I remember the dessert. It was a baked Alaska back when baked Alaska was a thing.
Wow, it's still a thing.
Well, I know you don't see it very often. It's kind of an old school dessert. So, but they had
it. If you want to get Mark to come to your Lincoln Day dinner, all you counties out there, serve baked Alaska. Bonus,
and I'm to be bought with chocolate cake.
The best dessert was Montgomery County when they had an ice cream bar after the Lincoln Day dinner. I think it was Governor Ehrlich was speaking.
Well, there you go.
Someone do cream
That's good too.
Yeah,
Have you all had the chocolate cake out in Washington County? It is so good.
No, I haven't.
Chocolate cake, chocolate mousse in between, chocolate ganache on the outside, mini chocolate chips pressed into the chocolate ganache on the outside.
Oh, man,
so no pressure to all the county chairs around. Well, we've had county chairs from Florida on the show, but around the state of Maryland, that your choice of dessert will be carefully scrutinized by people across the state as to how good you are and when it was served. We know that I like it served early so I can, have it and then, move on. But anyway.
If dinner doesn't quite meet your standard, you can just go straight to dessert. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Always be preset.
Yes.
Let's see. What else is going on around the state that we can talk about? Tomorrow, you can join the Montgomery County Republican Club at the Mama Lucia in Olney with Speaker Delegate Chris Tomlinson for our first Thursday event. That's going to be a good time. It's also, Dwight reminding us, it's Asian American Heritage Month. And Diana, you are of Asian American descent. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I am half Japanese. My mother was, as a young girl, was living out in San Francisco in California during World War II. Her parents were naturalized citizens. She and her sister were born in the United States, so were regular American citizens. And during the war, she and her family, along with all the other Japanese Americans in California and along the West Coast, were put in internment camps. They were treated basically like criminals, given very little lead time to say, get rid of all your belongings, get rid of your possessions, take what you can carry in one suitcase and report. And they all willingly did it for the most part. And they got sent into internment camps where they were kind of basically treated like criminals. And at some point towards at the end of the war, we just said, okay, y'all can go now. And we're just had to pick up their lives and try to start over after having been interned. It's a pretty amazing thing to know that this happened in our history, and that unfortunately a lot of people don't know about that happened. But people lost their businesses, their homes, their livelihoods, and most of their belongings.
It really is interesting what a sorry chapter it is in American history. And you're right, it is largely forgotten, although it is obviously within the living memory of a substantial number of people who are alive today who went through that. We were talking a little bit about the reparations that before the show, the process for that.
That after a number of years, it's hard for me to remember when. I think I was probably about in late elementary school, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that would have made my mom probably in her 40s, 40s or 50s, that they finally approved, excuse me, reparations for the Japanese Americans that had been interned. But the condition of this was that you actually had to have been a resident in one of the camps. So by that period in time, only the people that were children in camps were still alive. All the adults had already passed on by that point in time. But both my mother and her sister, my aunt, got a payment from the federal government as a, we're sorry that we did this horrible thing to you. And as it was pointed out, yes, it was a Democrat president that allowed this awful thing to happen. Just a brief side, when they first were told to report, they were put on buses with the windows covered in paper, so they couldn't see out and nobody could see in, and for the Japanese people, who are very proud, being treated like this was just demolishing to their psyche and soul. But they were taken, my mother at least, was taken to Santa Anita racetrack, where they had just moved the horses out, and each family was assigned a stall that they had to clean out first. They had to remove the soiled straw, horse manure, etc., from a stall, and then that's where their family lived until they were sent to their permanent camp. In her case, it was in Gila, Arizona. But they had no idea where they were going to go, what kind of clothes they needed for it. Interestingly, I just read a book, listened on tape, but a book called Weed Flower, which is historical fiction, but it's about this young woman's family that went into the internment camp and what it was like for them. And I've heard my mom's stories, and this was pretty spot on. But it's just amazing what it did to their emotional lives as well as their physical lives. And also, while you were in camp, you had relatives that were serving in the military. There was an all-Japanese squadron, and it was one of the most highly decorated squadrons during the war. But their parents were locked up while they were fighting for our country.
Wow.
Actually, many of the people from that squadron came out of the camps.
Yes.
And very much one of the motivations was to, frankly, to demonstrate just how committed they were as an American, which is just, we're talking in many, as you mentioned, in many cases, people who were born here in the United States and yet were being treated so horribly.
Sure. And as I understand it, this was a kind of a West Coast thing, that it was predominantly the entire Western coast. Japanese Americans were interned. But I have heard from talking to other people that were on the East Coast, if you were of German descent, especially now I was talking to some people in Baltimore, German and Italian descent as well, they were afraid to go out at night by themselves. They would turn their lights off in the night, in the evening, and so forth, because people were worried and accusing them of being spies for Germany and Italy. And to a lesser extent, my mother's aunt lived in upstate New York, and that she was Japanese as well. And that's who my mother and her sister ended up moving into and living with after they were released from the camps. But that I didn't realize this until just a few years ago, that while she was not put in a camp, she had to deal with the prejudice of, just because she looks Japanese, that she could be a a spy or whatever too. So that they were much more, had to be careful about where they went. And they still, just like we have problems today with anti-Semitism, and then right after 9/11, that people were attacking anybody of Muslim descent because they were thought incorrectly, mostly thought that they might be doing something bad too. That we had this throughout the country.
Yeah, and I remember learning a little bit about the Japanese internment when I was in high school, but I can't help but draw the parallel as well with this also being Jewish American Heritage Month. So I get to share that with you. So that's awesome.
Right.
But very similar histories in like you mentioned, anti-Semitism, and the way that unfortunately Americans are not innocent, and obviously we're a big melting pot of a country, but there is still a lot of hate out there from both sides of the aisle. It's purely not political. It's just a lot of ignorance and a lot of hate.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that's interesting with the Japanese internment, that it wasn't just full-blooded Japanese. According to my mom, even myself and my children, if this was going on now with the situation there, we would have been taken and put in internment camps. By having a quarter Japanese blood in you, that you were taken, at least from the West Coast.
Well, and it's great to think about how far we've come as a nation. That, I mean, I think even the thought of something like that happening today in this country would be just completely shut down by either, both sides of the aisle, every person I can think of who is just a decent human being.
Yeah.
So it's good to look back and obviously remember our history so we don't repeat it, and see how far we've come as a nation.
But of course, as we look around the world, we realize just how, obviously the concept of never again resonates, but just recognizing that in so many different parts of the country, there are sort of ethnic violence, genocide, and other forms of violence are unfortunately still all too prevalent, and really represent a challenge.
Well, let's switch gears to a slightly lighter topic.
You're much better at shifting gears. I was like, how did we go?
I'm getting back into driving again, so I'm all about the shifting gears right
Jackie,
now, right?
Go for it. Go for it. Please.
Let's see.
Don't you drive an automatic though? There's no real shifting of gears.
Dwight, don't ruin my
quiet, Dwight.
I'm trying to think what other events are coming up around
the
county.
We were going to talk about what's going on with the thank God not, the mayor's office in Baltimore. It sounds to me, Diana, and maybe I've got this wrong, that the door to the mayor's office that he's got installed there is a revolving door. So, as his staff comes in and out, we've had another set of turnover, and also the city council wants to get involved with that. What's going on there? What do we know about that?
Do we want to specify first which city we're talking
about? Baltimore.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's true. I mean, I guess those who are political, whenever we talk of the city, it's always Baltimore. If you're talking about any other city, you refer to it by its name, but we all think of 23 jurisdictions and the city.
Right.
Which
is technically actually the way it is, right?
Yes. If you're a political person, I mean, central committees, etc., 23 jurisdictions and the city. Mm-hmm. But yes, the city of Baltimore, where we have read that not our mayor, the mayor, we would really like it to be our mayor, because, that Baltimore typifies the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting something different. They elect the Democrats over and over and over, and they expect some different outcome. And over more than, I guess, the last 50 plus years, that is, Democrats have had a complete monopoly hold on government in Baltimore City. And that's, I think, a big reason why you see so many problems, because everybody seems to want to get in there, and no matter what they campaign on, they all want to seem to get in there and get their little piece of the pie that is Baltimore City. And that apparently includes staff for the mayor. That was the chief of staff and the comms director, I think it was, I was reading, and that apparently the communications director was working out of their private sector office or something and getting paid for being the comms director at the same time, and then that the chief of staff enabled it or covered it up or something, and that's why they both got canned. And that this was, yeah, it's a revolving door. He just can't seem to hire good people to surround himself, which makes you kind of wonder about his judgment, I guess, to be nice about it. And that the city council, I read, is now wanting to get in and find out why he can't find decent people to work for him or hire good people to work in that office.
Now, this particular team had only been in since last fall, as I recall. So this is a rotation that he has been going through of finding good people and holding on to them.
Well, I'm going to talk directly to the people of Baltimore City, as you mentioned, Diana, with this definition of insanity. Maybe try giving a Republican a try and see if it does something for cleaning up the crime and getting some people who actually do the job they're hired to do. You know,
exactly.
What do you have to lose at this point?
At that point, I've always thought it was, I mean, it's not really something you as chairman of the party, you say that this should be our description, but I've often thought in places like that, we should say, try a Republican. Could it possibly get any worse? What have you got to lose? Could it get worse?
No, I'd put that on a mailer.
Right. I mean, but specifically though, I mean, one of the grim, I mean, we can talk about various aspects of Baltimore, certainly about police and crime, but also
education.
About education in particular. The one of the scandals going on in Maryland these days are the disappearing education statistics.
Yes.
Which is so that, you know, a couple of months ago, to their credit, Fox Baltimore, a television station up there, uncovered just how bad some metrics about how bad schools were, and specifically schools that no kids were hitting any of the markers. And then all of a sudden, those numbers disappeared and became asterisks. So, Diana, you want to take it from there?
Well, I mean, you were doing such a good job. You can keep going, but it was really bizarre, interesting that, you know, the metrics were there, the numbers were there, and then suddenly they disappeared. And then it's coming out that, well, the numbers that were posted first were not accurate or were not complete. And then it comes out that, oh, it was the website company. They did something. And then the website company comes back and says, no, we didn't. We did. We posted what they told us to post. So it becomes a he said, she said, but they're just not, they're doubling or tripling down on it and saying, no, that they screwed up. And you just got to wonder that if.
So let me see if I have this right,
yes.
Diana, because I may be a little slow here. So as they're putting out the education statistics, the problem with the numbers is the website company got them wrong?
That's what I read somewhere, that they did something wrong. But then the website company immediately, after being thrown under the bus, came back and said, and that wasn't us. We didn't do it. We did we put up what you gave us. And that's basically how that works. You give them a spreadsheet or some kind of an FTP data file. They put it in the format so it looks pretty on the website. I don't know, but again, it just keeps, especially when we've got the Kerwin Commission Blueprint for Excellence thing going on, and all the money that they're going to want to spend, they're planning to spend on that it is clearly, I mean, it's obvious to all Republicans, spending more money does not produce a better outcome. Working with the children and the educators, et cetera, that's what produces a better outcome, not just throwing more money at it.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up on the end of the show, so I figure we go around, plug anything else that we haven't plugged yet, and then we'll call it a night. How does that sound?
MFRW.org to buy tickets to go to our brunch. The Garrett County Republican Central Committee's website to get tickets for their Lincoln Day dinner. I'm sure that'll be up in a day or so. Where should we go for looking at the YR? What's happening with YRs?
I would be remiss if I did not plug that we are fundraising. We have a $15,000 fundraising goal. We've made over $4,000 so far in less than a month. So if you want to help us reach that goal, it's mdyrs.com. It's a beautiful new website that Dwight has built for us. So even if you don't have the extra money to spare, go and check out the website. It's beautiful. Dwight has done a fantastic job with helping us get up and running.
Big donations are good, but little donations add up too, right?
Exactly. Yes. We take monthly recurring donations. We take one-time large annual donations. We have sponsorship opportunities. We have an investment deck up on our website that you can check out on why you should invest in YRs, how you can get involved with investing in YRs, and what you get out of it. So check it out. It's a beautiful site. We have an interactive map at the bottom. It's my favorite feature. Yes. So that's the YRs.
Well, thank you very much, Diana. We really appreciated your
thank you guys for having me.
and joining us.
Yes.
And Jackie, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, and we'll see you all at pizza tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.